Charles, Hillary Clinton has enjoyed a life of lying, and now she's out there saying that people need to go to jail for stuff that she doesn't like going out on Twitter.
Amazing. I mean, this person, and first of all, the art department is availing itself. It's the cutting edge of modern technology. You've got 1,000 Filipinos with their little paintbrushes doing this stuff overnight. It's amazing. But
isn't he?
Yeah, this is people. Obviously, everyone grows up differently, and those of you who are fortunate enough to still have your parents around, spend time with them. But if I were Chelsea Clinton, I think I'd be going to a psychiatrist 3 times a day. I mean, this person, Hillary Clinton, we know from Dan Bongino, in a tweet that he put out, that he claims that he was on her Secret Service detail. And he says in a tweet that just went out a few hours ago that there are people on that detail who have stories about her that are positively terrifying, but they can't talk and they won't talk. And he says in his tweet that she is evil. And I believe she is. I believe that I'm not one of these Christians who says, oh, turn the other cheek. There's always a good side of every human. There are certain people who are just evil, and Hillary Clinton is one of them. The comment that has set the internet ablaze, including even Elon Musk tweeting it out, is, "Oh, you're blocked?"
Yeah, Dan Bongino is a lawfare operative. Stephen Biss, he's a loser, but whatever.
Right. Well, but nonetheless, just staying with the issue of his security detail, I know from what he said, and I know from another source, a very credible source, that there are disgusting stories about Hillary Clinton when she was First Lady. The way she treated people, what she did at Camp David with her girlfriends, and just really disgusting stuff. And she's like anybody else. If you let a bully get away with bullying and you reward that bully with book contracts, their most recent book is a complete disgrace, with mansions that you shouldn't be able to afford, with speaking fees that make no sense, with television appearances that you let this person operate that way for 50 years, and you get the monster you now see in Hillary Clinton, somebody who would have the nerve to probably push Joe Biden and meritless fart man down the path of throwing however many people have been thrown in jail over January 6th for daring to question the legitimacy of the 2020 vote count. This woman had, ever since really before the election of 2016, she was quoted as saying, "Why am I not 50 points ahead of the polls?" Because there are people who are decent in the United States of America is the answer. And then referring to Trump voters as deplorables, and now most recently saying that they're not deplorable, they're worse than that. I mean, who does this bitch think she is?
When did she say that, Charles? Worse than deplorable?
In the last week or so. She doubled down on the use of the term deplorables. And so this is somebody who, actually the concept that Thomas Jefferson had, and he was a genius, was to let this kind of an idiot speak, but then encourage the people who are listening to her to humiliate her and criticize her in response and point her out for being the moron that she is. I mean, this is somebody who, it's the worst possible example. I don't need somebody to help me figure out how to divide up my stuff amongst my children and whoever else I'm going to leave stuff to. I don't need her help or any outsider's help in that. I'll do that myself. Thank you very much. And these people who make a career specialty of figuring out how to divide up the income produced in a year in this country and other countries, or divide up the wealth of the country based on never having legitimately earned any income or created any wealth themselves, these are dangerous people. They're thugs. Hillary Clinton belongs in a mental institution, getting the kind of care that might be available to her as she weans herself off of the daily tub of Chardonnay that she ingests, probably through tubes that are strapped into her mouth.
Should we listen to this, Charles, for people who maybe haven't heard this insanity?
Please, and if I have to throw up, Forgive me.
Yeah, they give you the bag from the plane.
There should be a lot of things done. We should be, in my view, repealing something called Section 230, which gave, platforms on the internet immunity because they were thought to be just pass-throughs, that they shouldn't be judged for the content that is posted. But we now know that that was an overly simple view, that if the platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter X or Instagram or TikTok, whatever they are, if they don't moderate and monitor the content, we lose total control. There should be a lot of things done.
Total control, Charles. She loses total control. Twitter X.
Well,
it's like Latinx.
Yeah, if we think about that, I am very grateful to my agent, my book agent, for being as patient as she and her husband have been. Is that there? Is that still going?
What do you mean? What?
I hear it's still going. Anyway, but for a number of reasons, I was reluctant to put the book out there until public opinion had become more potentially receptive to the view that I have. And that view is that reality since 1988 has been altered by the prisms that exist that really marginalize anybody who might be critical of unregulated globalism. And those prisms are, as Hillary's pointed out, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the major print. They have an editorial board, and they have people who decide when pesky reporters want a budget to go down to Haiti and look into the Clinton Foundation, the editors can say, it's a nice idea, but you're not doing it because, and they can say, we don't have the money to do it, right? So complex frauds don't get unraveled, courtesy of Peter Baker at the New York Times and other people like him, who are Obama sycophants, and who are doing their level best to protect Obama, but B, perhaps unwittingly, to protect the narrative that unregulated globalism is the future and makes the most amount of sense for the entire population, that countries are outmoded, et cetera. So you have the print media. It used to be, and I remember when I tried to expose GE and successfully did so, the key was getting my analysis into the Sunday Times of London. From there, it then went to all the major all the major different print media under a theory that if it passed muster at the editorial board at the Sunday Times of London, then it's a story worth taking seriously. So you have that issue. You have most people actually don't read newspapers anymore and haven't for many years. So then it gets you to TV. Now, network TV, the network TV is all owned by big companies, big media companies, and they all want to do business in China. They all want to do business across Europe. So they will do their level best not to offend the authorities in China, the authorities in Europe. They're playing for a chance to interview the Secretary General of the UN and to go to the World Economic Forum and all that kind of stuff. And their preferred methodology of dealing with the public does not lend itself to the kind of analysis we do on this show and you do on other shows of hours and hours of uninterrupted by commercial commentary. Theirs is all short bursts. It's typically at least two guests and a moderator in a 6 to 8 minute segment. Then you have commercials and station breaks, et cetera. So you don't ever get the momentum up to dive deep into a complex task on TV or on cable TV. Then you get to movies, of course. Those are now all, you know more about that than I do. Those are huge, huge budget operations. And it's very easy for somebody, the money or the suits, to say, no, you're not doing this anti-Clinton thing or this anti-Obama thing. Forget that movie. We're going to do a movie praising Prince Obama. Is the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so the movie industry is all distilled. Then they get to the big book publishing industry. That's controlled by a small number of families, many of whom are actually German, which is surprising to me that we would have, private German foundations controlling the book industry. And then you get to the academia, when people want to trot out and disparage a controversial view as either being conspiratorial or something. They'll say, well, you're saying X, Y, and Z, but academics from Harvard, Yale, and MIT say this. Well, those academics are all reliant, at least their institutions are all reliant on federal grants. You look at the amount of federal money that goes to the elite universities, it's gigantic. And then on top of that, you have state institutions that are getting all kinds of taxpayer funding. So we're in a place, it's taken a while, but we're in a place finally where the public is looking at the so-called experts who say, well, of course, Hillary Clinton says Trump supporters are deplorable. That must be right. She went to Yale Law School and she was valedictorian at Wellesley and she's this and she's that. She's a fucking moron. She's a conflicted, dangerous moron who has never accomplished anything positive politically in her life. Her tenure as Secretary of State was a disaster around the world and particularly in the Middle East. She ran the Secretary of State with no inspector general, controlling the aid program, which was the first time that had ever been done. She conducted 100% of her government work on unsecured private servers using unvetted electronic devices. All of this information was likely compromised. We still don't know the true extent of that record. Obama's presidential record, incomplete as a result, to put it charitably. And this person came within a heartbeat of being president of the United States. Think how flawed our system is to let that happen. She should have been disqualified from the start. She should have never gotten her position as senator in New York State. I mean, think of that. Not having set one foot as a resident in the state. She gets Terry McAuliffe because she doesn't have the money because they're delaying paying their massive legal bills that they should have paid. She gets Terry McAuliffe to front the Clintons the money to buy her not an apartment, of course, but a gigantic mansion in Chappaqua, so she can pretend she's a New York resident. She gets the Kobe Bryant Senate seat, because Bill cheated on her. He gets his Democrat friends in a blue state to just say, okay, you can be senator. Why not? You're qualified to represent the people of New York. You're one of the smartest lawyers on earth. And then she goes to the Senate and does what? She doesn't stop the Iraq War. She's proud of the war. She's a war pig.
Oh, yeah.
And what has she done for women? She's this fearless children's and women's advocate. Ask the women and children of Haiti how well they've done under Hillary Clinton. And so for this person to open her damn pie hole and start suggesting that she can devise a system for deciding what is truth and what is falsehood, as 8 billion people around the planet use technology to exchange their ideas. It's ridiculous on its face. They need to, give her clean up one of those white suits with the arms that kind of go like this, and pick her up from wherever she is and place her in an institution, so that eventually after she dies, her brain can be dissected, and maybe we can use AI to figure out what kind of a person should never come close to the levers of power ever again. Not that I have any strong views on this.
Charles, this, of course, is your visit to the Chappaqua data center. This video still lives on Odyssey. People can see it there for free. What did you think about the, Trump's decision to return to Butler? Kind of an epic political rally over there.
Well, the commentary, of course, I'm 12 hours ahead of you time-wise. And so I got up early and I had a chance to look at a lot of articles and commentary. They're describing this rally not as epic, but as legendary. So he timed it. Yeah. You were there, but my understanding is he timed it so that he begins his speech. I think he puts the chart up, right, and he says, "As I was saying,"
right.
I mean, that is just legendary, and it was so nice and moving and touching. The honor with which I can't pronounce the man's name, but the person who was killed, they paid homage to that person, and he did his best to comfort the families. It was just a very well thoughtful orchestration But beyond that, 105,000 people showed up, and none of them were paid. You contrast that with the Hee Haw Harris rally, and I gather they have the technology now. I've seen reports where you can, somebody has the ability to figure out the cellular devices that were there and where are those devices from. And in this rally's case, they were scattered, of course, from Pennsylvania, but from nearby states. In the Harris rallies, heavily concentrated out of state, so far out of state. So in her North Carolina rally a number of weeks ago, it was like 80% were from Georgia, from Atlanta. Obviously, most of those people were bussed in. That's not the case here. This is just as you and I saw on January 6th in Washington, D.C. We walked around there. There's a great tape that you did of 5 hours length. And where there were people from all over the United States there at that January 6th rally. And they all, as far as I understand, we paid our own way. Most everybody who attended paid their own way. We were concerned about what had happened in the 2020 election. But so this is a real rally, the Butler one. It's a real expression of support. And watching that and thinking about things as I have been, I've come to the conclusion that if Trump doesn't win and they try to install Kamala Harris as president and then continue these policies of open borders and rising crime and endless wars, I have to predict that red states will not accept that. They just won't. And depending on how hard they push this, you could. I mean, Biden warned about the possibility of violence during the election. I'd be more concerned about the possibility of violence after the election if they try to rig it and pretend that Hee Haw and this idiot Walz actually won. Because the polls now that I see that concentrate on likely voters and adjust for the Electoral College reality, those polls show a landslide for Trump. And every appearance, most recently, the idiot went on some show. It's called, what is the name of that podcast?
Which
Jason?
one? Which
the
one?
one she just went. She went on a podcast that's a spinoff out of Barstool Sports. Something about Daddy is the title of it. It's the number one women's podcast, apparently, women's audience podcast. It started out as a podcast. If you use Harris and podcast, you should get right to it. And it started out as sort of humorous for women, tales of sex gone wrong and tips on sex and tips on grooming and this and that. And then they had that's it going forward. But she just recently did this podcast, the last several days. And the name was in my head.
Call Her Daddy.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Call Her Daddy. And you look this thing up, and in the old days they used to give the best way to give a man a blowjob. I mean, this is not a serious political, economic, global affairs, as it were, podcast. And given her background and her questionable associations with Willie Brown and Montel Williams, and now this goof of a husband. Who advised her to go on this podcast? It's ridiculous. And then so Andrea Mitchell, who is the consummate insider, DC insider, whose husband was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, long ago, she apparently over the weekend was beside herself saying that Kamala has to do serious interviews. So what did she decide to do? Well, I'll do serious interviews with Howard Stern, with The View, with Steve Colbert. And then these are not serious interviews.
No.
Right? And she just thinks she could coast her way into the presidency, just as she coasted her way into politics, maybe the hard way, having to sleep with Willie Brown, but into politics, into the Senate, into the vice presidency. Now she thinks she's just going to coast her way into the presidency. And if the people who follow Saturday Night Live have anything to do with it, I think that's not going to happen. Barring martial law, Martians landing on the Earth, and taking over the planet and eating us all. I mean, I just don't see a legitimate election result of Harris winning. I just don't see it. And I also think you could, my reason I'm so fervent on that view is that I've been watching the different Senate races, which, were supposed to be close. And here you have an incumbent in Montana, John Tester, who is being demolished by a Trump acolyte in a debate. You have there's a guy in, I think, Virginia, who the Vietnamese guy, I want to say his name is something like Hung Cao, which is kind of a great name. But he
extra
he
sauce
debated,
on that.
yeah, but this is a great story. I mean, this is a child of Vietnamese immigrants who went into the Navy, U.S. Navy, became a captain. That's serious shit to be a Navy captain. And now is running for Senate in Virginia against the man Hillary Clinton selected to be her vice presidential nominee. They have this debate, and Tim Kaine is the consummate DC insider talking about DEI and the wisdom of this, that, and the other thing. And Cal supposedly said, "Listen, that's the problem with the military. We don't need people who are LGBTQ experts in the military. We need people who are prepared to eat their guts to fight the enemy and win the war." And the crowd just went, loved it.
Yeah.
And it was, I saw a poll which suggested he won by 75-25 in that one. That would be a huge flip if he wins that. And in Pennsylvania, a similar result. So I think down ticket in the Senate, they're going to lose the Senate for sure, I think. The House is tougher to tell. And people agonize and they say that the Republicans only have a thin majority, and then the inside spinners say, and the problem with the Republicans in the House is the conservatives are maniacs, and it's 20 people in the conservative wing who are destroying Republican chances. I don't think that's the case at all. I think actually there are too many rhinos in Congress, and I hope this election washes a bunch of them out and gets a bunch of truly economic conservative people in there who are thoughtful about waging war. We should not be worshiping at the altar of perpetual war to enrich Boeing and Lockheed Martin. We're talking about the very people whose lives have been washed out in North Carolina. Those are the kind of people who gleefully sign up to serve in our all-volunteer military fighting forces. Before we send those people out to fight barbarians around the world, so that Zelensky and his wife can have another home in Monte Carlo, we ought to be a lot more careful and less reflexive about saying, bomb, bomb, bomb Iran every second, the way Lindsey Graham likes to say, and John McCain used to say. So, I'm hopeful that the pollsters and pundits are wrong, and they were looking at a landslide here. Unfortunately, we are looking at a landslide, the wrong kind, in North Carolina, and the tales coming out of there, if they're true, if what I'm reading is true, and I'm seeing multiple different reports, my prime news source now is Twitter. Excellent, timely things sent to me well before the mainstream picks them up. If it is true that through their dithering, there's a picture of Mallorca, some high-end Washington D.C. mall out shopping instead of orchestrating what should be a turbocharged cleanup effort, much more comprehensive than Katrina. I'm seeing reports that FEMA is obstructing the delivery of relief and sitting on its ass. This is outrageous. And I've got family down in Florida. There's another hurricane bearing down on Tampa right now, supposedly. As of this moment, it could change course, but this is not the end of it, the problem in North Carolina. There could be more bad stuff to come. And this idiot's out shopping, dressed like a weenie. He's dressed like Tim Waltz there.
Yeah, I mean, he's an idiot. He thinks people aren't going to see him. I mean, how could he not have a sense of urgency? This guy's just sitting there snapping photos of him.
I'll put on my best white pants and go to a meeting of Weenies Anonymous. I mean, the guy... Was he wearing white socks and black shoes?
He's wearing New Balance sneakers.
Oh, okay. What a fucking weasel.
He is a pretty terrible guy, Charles. You know, Charles, it's almost time for us to make our way over to the First Amendment Forum here. We still have a lot of stuff to talk about. You know, the Trump rally, Elon Musk's comments there, the incredible surge. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. You know, rock concert, stand-up comedian. It's like Andrew Dice Clay in the late 80s or early 90s, or Eddie Murphy, these guys who were the Beatles the first time they filled up a stadium. We've never seen anything like this. But we'll be back in just 5 minutes. Stay with us. And if you're not already a sponsor, please join us on odyssey.com/@crowdsource the truth or any of the other Crowdsource the Truth sponsorship channels.